At my son's funeral, his wife finally arrived, hours late, smelling of stale perfume. She asked if I'd already picked out his casket, then checked her lipstick in a compact. My heart froze, but I simply nodded. She didn't know I saw everything, Daniel. If you've ever felt that cold betrayal, listen to my story. Please like, share, and let me know which city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale reaches. The jarring ring of the landline, a sound almost obsolete in her quiet home, sliced through Evelyn Sterling's fitful sleep. She fumbled for the receiver, her vision still blurred by dreams of Daniel as a child, laughing in the summer sun. The glowing red numbers on her digital clock glared 2:17 a.m. No good news ever arrived at 2:17 a.m. Mrs. Sterling, a harried voice on the other end. This is Mercy Hospital. We have your son, Daniel Sterling. He's been brought in with a suspected brain aneurysm. Evelyn's breath hitched. A suspected aneurysm. It was a phrase that offered a sliver of hope, a brutal lie her mind clung to. Daniel, her brilliant, kind-hearted only child. He was 38, vibrant, full of life. He couldn't be dying. The words echoed in her skull, a frantic, desperate prayer. She fumbled with her keys, her hands shaking so violently she almost dropped them. The drive to Mercy Hospital was a blur of streetlights and desperate pleas whispered into the empty car. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Please, God, not Daniel. But the grim-faced doctor who met her in the sterile waiting room shattered that fragile hope with a single devastating sentence. Mrs. Sterling, I am so sorry. Your son, he's gone. The world tilted. The fluorescent lights hummed, suddenly too bright, too loud. The air grew thick, pressing down on her lungs until she couldn't breathe. Her son, her everything, had simply ceased to be boing. Hours blurred into a disorienting haze of paperwork and unthinkable decisions. Organ donation, funeral arrangements, notifying family. Each task felt like carving a piece of her soul away. Then, hours later, long after Evelyn had made the initial calls, long after the dawn had broken and grayed into morning, Daniel's wife, Vanessa Hayes, finally arrived. Her entrance wasn't quiet, but a rustle of expensive fabric and a hushed phone call that ended abruptly as she spotted Evelyn. Vanessa, 10 years Daniel's junior, always seemed to operate on a different timeline, a detached rhythm Evelyn had come to know all too well. "Aunt Evelyn," Vanessa began, her voice a little too bright, a little too apologetic. "I'm so sorry I'm late. Traffic was dreadful, and then finding someone for Ethan." She trailed off, gesturing vaguely with her manicured hand. Evelyn simply nodded, a cold, empty feeling settling deeper within her. She had already called the neighbor, arranged for 8-year-old Ethan to stay with his friend until she could collect him. Vanessa, Evelyn thought, rarely thought beyond herself. She looked at Vanessa, her expression unreadable. "Daniel is gone," Evelyn stated, the words flat and final. She watched Vanessa closely, waiting for the crack in her composure, the genuine grief that should have ravaged her son's wife. Vanessa's carefully constructed mask slipped for a fleeting moment, a flicker of something Evelyn couldn't quite decipher. Then a calculated performance began. Her hands flew to her mouth, her eyes widening, a small choked sob escaping her lips. But he was fine yesterday," she stammered, her voice catching with a feigned regret that didn't quite reach her eyes. Evelyn saw it, the careful angling of her face, the quick glance around the empty waiting room. It wasn't grief, it was an act, a cold, chilling calculation. "Of course," Vanessa continued, pulling herself together with remarkable speed. "You'll handle all the arrangements, won't you, Evelyn? You know Daniel's wishes best." She was already pulling out her phone again, her fingers flying across the screen, making hushed phone calls that seemed to have nothing to do with her late husband. As Evelyn numbly answered a nurse's question about Daniel's personal effects, she caught Vanessa's reflection in the glass of a closed-off office door. Vanessa wasn't crying, wasn't mourning. She was checking her reflection, smoothing an invisible wrinkle from her expensive blouse, her eyes cool, assessing. There was no pain, no shock, just a chilling, almost predatory appraisal. A fresh wave of grief, sharper and colder than before, washed over Evelyn. It wasn't just for Daniel's death, but for the stark reality of who he had married. A terrifying thought pierced the fog of her despair, a whisper of dread that sent a shiver down her spine. Daniel might have foreseen this. He might have known somehow who Vanessa truly was and what his death would unleash. The horror of it all had only just begun. The air in the funeral home hung heavy with the scent of lilies and unspoken sorrow. Evelyn sat in the front pew, the weight of Daniel's absence a physical ache in her chest. She had prepared herself, or so she thought, for the crushing finality of the day. What she hadn't anticipated was Vanessa's performance, a masterclass in emotional manipulation that unfolded before her disbelieving eyes. Vanessa arrived precisely on time, an hour after the first mourners had gathered. She was impeccably dressed in a designer black dress that somehow managed to be both modest and alluring, her silhouette striking against the muted backdrop of the chapel. Her makeup was subtle, flawless, her tear-proof mascara ensuring not a single smudge betrayed her carefully cultivated grief. Throughout the service, she dabbed occasionally at her dry eyes with a pristine monogrammed handkerchief, a prop as carefully chosen as her pearl earrings. She leaned on Evelyn at calculated intervals, a sympathetic arm around her, a whispered comment. "He would have appreciated such a turnout," Vanessa murmured, her voice laced with what sounded like profound sadness, though her eyes, Evelyn noted, constantly scanned the room. They weren't focused on the casket or even on the faces of those who had come to pay their respects to Daniel. No, Vanessa's gaze was assessing, appraising, cataloging the social and financial status of every person in attendance. Seated beside Evelyn, Daniel's 8-year-old son Ethan was truly grieving. His small body shook with silent sobs, his face buried in Evelyn's side. He wasn't performing. He was heartbroken. "Is Daddy really in there?" he whispered, his voice thin and choked, tugging at Evelyn's sleeve. Evelyn's heart broke anew for her grandson. "His body is sweet, P," she gently explained, stroking his hair. "But his spirit, his love, is still with you, always." Before Ethan could respond, Vanessa leaned across Evelyn, her voice a sharp, intrusive whisper. "Ethan, sit up straight. People are watching." Evelyn felt a jolt of ice in her veins. Even now, Vanessa prioritized appearances over her son's raw pain. Mourners approached, sharing stories of Daniel's unwavering kindness, his sharp intellect, his infectious laugh, and his quiet integrity. Each anecdote was a bittersweet balm for Evelyn's wounded soul, a reminder of the man she had lost. Yet even these moments of shared remembrance were tinged with unease. Evelyn observed Vanessa having intense, hushed conversations in a corner of the room with a man Evelyn didn't recognize. He was tall, impeccably dressed, with a stern, angular face. His name, Julian Vance, was introduced to her briefly, his handshake impersonal and swift. But as he turned away, Evelyn saw Vanessa's hand briefly touch his arm, a gesture of familiarity that spoke volumes. Who was he, and why was Vanessa discussing something so intently with him at Daniel's funeral? Just as the last hymn faded, Marcus Thorne, Daniel's attorney, approached Evelyn. A kind man with a gentle demeanor, he offered his sincere condolences. "Evelyn, my deepest sympathies. Daniel spoke so highly of you." He then lowered his voice. "We'll need to discuss Daniel's will at some point, when you're ready." Vanessa, who had been listening intently, seemed to perk up instantly. "Of course," she interjected, a sudden sharpness in her voice. "Perhaps tomorrow. I'd like to get things settled quickly for Ethan's sake." The phrase, "for Ethan's sake," sounded hollow, a flimsy excuse for her sudden eagerness. As the funeral concluded and the mourners began to disperse, Evelyn suggested, "I'll pick up Ethan from the neighbor's house, Vanessa. You must be exhausted." But Vanessa quickly, almost fiercely, asserted, "No, I can handle my own son." As they stepped out into the cool evening air, Evelyn watched Vanessa pause, not to take a moment of quiet reflection, but to check her reflection in the darkened window of a waiting car. Her eyes held that same cool assessment Evelyn had seen at the hospital. Then she pulled out her phone, already making another call, her face betraying no emotion, no lingering grief. Clutching a small, worn photograph of Daniel as a mischievous 10-year-old, Evelyn felt a surge of resolve. Her grief was still overwhelming, but it was now mingled with a growing suspicion, a chilling sense of foreboding. She would be strong for Ethan. She would be strong for Daniel, and she would watch Vanessa, for something was terribly, terribly wrong. The hushed formality of Marcus Thorne's office felt like a stark contrast to the raw grief that still clawed at Evelyn's heart. She sat across from the mahogany desk, Vanessa beside her, both women cloaked in black. Today, however, Vanessa's flawless composure, usually so impenetrable, began to crack. As Marcus began to read Daniel's last will and testament, Evelyn watched a chilling progression play across Vanessa's face. First, a flicker of smug satisfaction, quickly followed by confusion, then a thinly veiled outrage that betrayed her carefully constructed facade. Marcus, his voice calm and measured, outlined Vanessa's inheritance. The sprawling lake house Daniel had bought years ago, a substantial investment portfolio, and a $500,000 life insurance policy. It was a generous sum, more than enough to live comfortably, but Evelyn could see it wasn't what Vanessa expected. Her jaw tightened, a subtle tremor running through her perfectly manicured hand resting on her lap. Her expectations were clearly unmet, the substantial sum clearly less than she had anticipated from Daniel's considerable wealth. Then came the bombshell. "To my beloved mother, Evelyn Sterling," Marcus continued, his gaze briefly meeting Evelyn's. "I bequeath the family home located at 14 Willow Creek Drive, both personal vehicles and my personal bank account." "That's impossible," Vanessa erupted, her voice sharp, cutting through the quiet office. Her nails, tipped in a deep burgundy, dug visibly into the armrest of her chair. "We purchased that house together, Marcus. It's ours." The word ours dripped with possessiveness, not partnership. Marcus calmly pushed a stack of documents across the desk. "Mrs. Hayes, with all due respect, these records show the property at 14 Willow Creek Drive was purchased solely in Daniel's name, 2 years prior to your marriage." The cold, hard facts hung in the air. Deflating Vanessa's indignant claim, thwarted, Vanessa shifted tactics. "What about Ethan's college fund?" she demanded, her tone laced with accusation, as if Evelyn or Marcus were withholding something from her son. "Daniel established a separate, irrevocable trust for Ethan's educational expenses," Marcus explained, his gaze unwavering. "Furthermore, Evelyn has been named the sole trustee of all funds related to Ethan's care and education." He looked directly at Evelyn as he said it, a subtle confirmation of Daniel's trust in her. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, a venomous hiss escaping her lips. "This makes no sense. Daniel and I discussed our estate plans explicitly. He would never exclude me like this." The desperate edge in her voice was undeniable now. Marcus leaned forward slightly, his tone regretful but firm. "Mrs. Hayes, Daniel updated his will just 3 months ago. Everything is legally executed and notarized." The words hung in the air, a final, unassailable truth. 3 months ago, Daniel had foreseen this, had planned for it. Evelyn absorbed the implications, a chilling understanding dawning on her. Daniel, her loving, brilliant son, had secretly revised his will, not out of spite, but to protect her and Ethan from Vanessa. He must have known. He must have seen something. Vanessa turned her icy gaze on Evelyn, her voice dripping with false concern. "Surely you don't intend to take what's rightfully ours away from Ethan, Evelyn. What kind of grandmother would do that?" The attempt at emotional manipulation was transparent. Evelyn, still reeling from the unexpected revelations, maintained a neutral facade. "I'm as surprised as you are, Vanessa. I need time to process all of this." It was a lie, but a necessary one. With a furious huff, Vanessa gathered her things, storming out of the office. Evelyn heard the click of her heels fading down the hallway. A moment later, Marcus extended a sealed, cream-colored envelope across the desk. "This is for you, Evelyn. Daniel wanted you to have it." He offered a small, knowing smile. "Trust that." The implication was clear. Daniel had been meticulously prepared. As Evelyn left the office building, she heard Vanessa's voice, sharp and furious, echoing from the parking lot. "Julian, I was blindsided, absolutely blindsided. But don't worry, I'll fight this, every last bit of it." Julian, the man from the funeral. A knot of dread tightened in Evelyn's stomach. Back home in the quiet sanctuary of her living room, Evelyn's hands trembled as she broke the seal on Daniel's letter. His familiar handwriting swam before her eyes. "Mom," it began, "if you're reading this, then my worst fears have come true. My marriage to Vanessa has been failing for a long time. There have been discoveries. Things I can't put in this letter. things that made me fear for Ethan's future more than anything. Evelyn gasped, a cold shiver running down her spine. Discoveries. What could Daniel have found? The house, the cars, the money I've left you. They aren't really for you, Mom, the letter continued, his voice echoing in her mind. They are tools, tools to ensure Ethan has one stable, loving parent figure when I'm gone. Vanessa is not that person. She will fight this. She will try to manipulate you, to convince you to give her control. Please, Mom, don't let her know what you know or suspect. Watch and wait. Document everything. Protect Ethan. Promise me. Evelyn pressed the letter to her chest, the thin paper now damp with her tears. The grief was still immense, but it was now overshadowed by a terrifying sense of urgency, a chilling mission. Daniel had known. He had planned. And now Evelyn understood. She was no longer just a grieving mother. She was Ethan's protector, an unwilling combatant in a war Daniel had already begun, a war that promised to uncover dark truths she wasn't sure she wanted to face. The morning sun streamed into Daniel's kitchen, casting a warm glow on the table where Evelyn sat with Ethan. Evelyn poured cereal for her grandson, her heart aching as she watched his small, forlorn face. He looked up at her, his eyes wide and innocent, echoing the profound question in his heart. "Grandma," he asked, his voice barely a whisper, "when is Dad coming back?" Evelyn's breath hitched. She reached across the table, taking his small hand in hers. "Oh, sweet pea," she began, her voice thick with emotion. "Daddy can't come back, but he'll always be with you, right here." She gently tapped his chest over his heart. The words were a familiar comfort, yet they tasted like ash in her mouth. She missed Daniel so deeply it felt like a physical wound. Evelyn had moved into Daniel's house, now her house, according to the will, a few days after the funeral. The familiar scent of his life still lingered in the air, a constant, bittersweet reminder. She suspected Vanessa was already meeting with her own attorney, fueled by the fury Evelyn had overheard in the parking lot. Evelyn knew she had to be ready. Sure enough, a few days later, a sharp knock announced Vanessa's arrival. She didn't wait for Evelyn to open the door, letting herself in with a spare key Daniel must have forgotten to retrieve. Vanessa stood in the entryway, impeccably dressed in a sleek business suit, her posture rigid, her expression carefully composed to convey a semblance of weary grief. She hadn't come to mourn. She had come to negotiate. "Evelyn," she said, her voice smooth, "we need to discuss arrangements going forward." Evelyn adopted a polite, somewhat deferential demeanor, playing the role of the accommodating, slightly overwhelmed mother-in-law. She gestured toward the living room. "Of course, Vanessa. Please sit." Vanessa settled onto the sofa, her hands clasped delicately in her lap. "This is all so difficult," she began, feigning an overwhelming sigh of grief. "For Ethan especially. It's why I think it's best we consider a fresh start. Perhaps a new condo for him and me. Something less full of memories." Her eyes, however, weren't misty with sorrow. They held a calculating glint. "Daniel's will," Vanessa continued, her voice becoming firmer. "It must be a mistake. A misunderstanding. He wasn't thinking clearly, Evelyn, not in his final months." Evelyn's hand instinctively went to the pocket where Daniel's letter now resided, a secret shield. "So," Vanessa pushed, her tone taking on a persuasive edge, "the easiest thing for everyone to avoid lengthy legal proceedings would be for you to transfer the house to me. As Daniel would have wanted, I'm sure." Evelyn nodded slowly, playing the part of thoughtful consideration. "But the will was updated only 3 months ago, Vanessa. Marcus said Daniel was quite clear in his intentions. Do you think he wasn't of sound mind then?" She watched for a reaction. Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. "Who can say, Evelyn? Grief, stress, it can do strange things to a person. But we must think of Ethan's sake, a quick, clean resolution." "Ethan," Evelyn repeated, her voice soft. "Perhaps we should ask him how he feels about moving. This is his home, after all." Vanessa's dismissive laugh was immediate, a brittle, jarring sound. "Children don't always know what's best for them, Evelyn. They need stability. Guidance, a new environment will do him good." Evelyn conceded, her gaze dropping to her hands. "You might be right, Vanessa. I'll think about it." She wanted Vanessa to believe she had made progress, that Evelyn was a pliable obstacle, easily swayed. As Vanessa rose to leave, a new concern creased her brow. "I am worried about finances, though. This house, The mortgage payments, they are substantial. She watched Evelyn, an unspoken question in her eyes. The mortgage was now Evelyn's responsibility, a fact Vanessa clearly knew. Oh, Evelyn said, feigning surprise. Yes, of course. Perhaps I could help you review Daniel's accounts, see if there's anything you might have missed. It was a subtle probing, a test. Vanessa quickly declined, a flicker of something guarded in her eyes. No, that's quite all right. I'll handle it. As soon as the front door closed behind Vanessa, Evelyn pulled out her phone, her fingers flying across the keypad. She needed Marcus. Marcus, she said, her voice low and urgent. I need to understand exactly what evidence Daniel collected and how we can gather more. This is going to be a longer game than I thought, and I intend to win it. If you think what I've told you so far is shocking, you haven't seen anything yet. The truth about Vanessa, Daniel, and the dark secrets he uncovered will leave you speechless. Don't miss a single moment of this unfolding mystery. Make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss the next part of my story. Trust me, it only gets wilder from here. The days after Vanessa's brazen attempt to claim the house were a blur of quiet observation for Evelyn. Ethan, still processing the immense grief of losing his father, found solace in his grandmother's presence. One afternoon, as they colored together at the kitchen table, he looked up, his brow furrowed with concern. Grandma, he began, his voice small, Mom says we're going to Miami next weekend with her friend Julian. Evelyn's blood ran cold. Julian Vance, the man from the funeral. But I don't want to go, Ethan continued, a tremor in his voice. I have my science project due the week after, and Mom said I could just skip it if we go. But Dad wouldn't want me to skip it. He always said commitments are important. The child's distress was palpable, a stark contrast to Vanessa's flippant attitude toward his education. Evelyn's mind raced. Miami. With Julian Vance. This was more than just a trip. She immediately called Marcus, her voice tight with urgency. Marcus, it's Evelyn. Ethan just told me Vanessa's taking him to Miami next weekend with her friend Julian. Julian Vance? Marcus's voice was instantly grave. The real estate developer Daniel had concerns about? This lines up with some of what Daniel suspected. Marcus paused. Evelyn, about that home monitoring system you installed for peace of mind after you moved in, is it fully operational? Evelyn confirmed it was. The next morning, a sealed envelope arrived from Marcus's office. Inside, Evelyn found a meticulously organized dossier damning evidence from Daniel's private file. Her hands trembled as she read. Printed text messages between Vanessa and JV, Julian Vance, laid bare a shocking truth. Their affair, stretching back months, was brazenly detailed. Plans for leaving Daniel, discussions of how to secure financials, and disturbingly, complaints about Ethan, whom Vanessa referred to as a nuisance and baggage. Messages from 2 months prior openly discussed securing financials before Vanessa left Daniel, and Evelyn's eyes widened at the mention of a Cayman property. Further in the dossier was a private investigator's report, complete with photographs. Vanessa and Julian, laughing, holding hands, even embracing at a discreet hotel several towns over. The report also detailed Julian's questionable business dealings, hints of shady transactions, and a history of skirting legal boundaries. Finally, a handwritten note from Daniel to Marcus, dated just 3 weeks before Daniel's death. In it, Daniel expressed his profound concern about confronting Vanessa directly, fearing it would jeopardize his access to Ethan. He wrote of his plans to quietly gather more evidence, to protect Ethan legally before making any move. Daniel had been building a case against his own wife. Armed with this horrifying knowledge, Evelyn strategically decided to discuss the Miami trip with Vanessa that afternoon. Vanessa arrived once again uninvited, her usual bravado slightly heightened. Evelyn adopted a facade of casual concern. Ethan mentioned his science project, Vanessa. He's worried about missing it. Daniel always puts such emphasis on his academics, you know. Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. Oh, Evelyn, a weekend off won't hurt his GPA. Besides, the school psychologist recommended new experiences for Ethan to help him cope with his father's passing. Evelyn knew this was a lie. She had spoken to the psychologist herself, and no such recommendation had been made. Evelyn subtly probed further. A boat trip with Richard, I think Ethan called him? Might be a bit much so soon, wouldn't it? She watched Vanessa closely, noting the slight tightening around her mouth at the mention of the fabricated name. It was a test, and Vanessa's fleeting irritation was her answer. Changing the subject, Evelyn said, I'm trying to organize Daniel's old computer files, but I can't find his password. Do you happen to remember it? Evelyn already had the password, thanks to Daniel's meticulous notes in his hidden file. She simply wanted to gauge Vanessa's reaction. Vanessa scoffed, avoiding Evelyn's gaze. His password? Evelyn, please. How would I know that? Daniel kept all his tech stuff very private. Another lie. Oh, well, Evelyn sighed, playing the part of the oblivious mother-in-law. I was also thinking of volunteering for Ethan's upcoming field trip. He'd love that, don't you think? Vanessa quickly, almost vehemently, declined the offer. No, that won't be necessary. I'll be taking him. I actually have a spa appointment that day for some much-needed mental health care, as I told the school. Evelyn knew it was a thinly veiled excuse to avoid any situation that would reveal her lack of engagement with Ethan's life. As soon as Vanessa left, Evelyn called Marcus again, her voice grim. She's taking Ethan to Miami with Julian Vance. I need to document this trip carefully. Marcus's voice was calm, reassuring. Don't worry, Evelyn. Our investigator is already on it. Miami is actually helpful for our purposes. It shows her priorities very clearly. This trip will only add to our evidence of neglect and endangerment. He paused. It's time we put the rest of Daniel's plan into action. Ethan returned from Miami looking utterly miserable. Sunburned with a telltale stomachache, he trudged into the house hours late, his small frame radiating a profound emotional withdrawal. The boat made me sick, he mumbled, barely making eye contact. Vanessa, meanwhile, swept in behind him, vibrant and tanned, smelling of salt and expensive perfume. Oh, he's just being dramatic, Evelyn, she dismissed, barely glancing at her son. He ate too much ice cream. She then launched into a nonchalant account of her weekend, mentioning Julian's regards and their exciting investment opportunities in Miami. Evelyn's gaze, however, was fixed on Ethan's school bag, which Vanessa carelessly tossed onto a chair. It was visibly damp, and Evelyn caught a glimpse of crinkled poster board and a half-finished volcano model, his science project materials. His project, Evelyn began, her voice even. It looks like it got wet. Vanessa waved a dismissive hand. Oh, that old thing. It's nothing important. Just some silly volcano. We'll get him another one. Later, upstairs, as Evelyn helped Ethan unpack, the dam broke. He confessed, his voice trembling, that his mother had been on her phone constantly, mostly ignoring him. He'd been left with a hotel babysitter who eventually fell asleep, leaving him to wake up alone and scared in an unfamiliar room. His calls to Vanessa's room, he recounted, had gone unanswered. The most heartbreaking detail, however, was Julian's comment. Julian said kids mess things up about his boat. Ethan whispered, his eyes welling up, and Mom laughed. He paused, then added, almost too quietly to hear, that Vanessa had told him it was important for her to be happy again, and I shouldn't make things harder by complaining. Evelyn's heart shattered. She pulled Ethan into a tight embrace, stroking his hair. Your feelings matter, sweet pea, she murmured, tears stinging her own eyes. They always matter. Your dad always asked about your feelings, remember? It was a quiet promise, a stark contrast to the emotional neglect he was experiencing. Evelyn meticulously documented these revelations in her journal, recognizing a chilling pattern of neglect that aligned perfectly with Daniel's warnings. Over the next 2 weeks, these patterns intensified. Vanessa's late nights grew more frequent, often leaving Ethan alone with Evelyn or a rotating cast of indifferent babysitters. She missed Ethan's parent-teacher conference, citing a vague work emergency, and most dangerously, forgot to refill his asthma medication, leaving Evelyn to rush to the pharmacy when Ethan's breathing became labored. The security system Daniel had installed, now quietly maintained by Evelyn, became her silent witness. One evening, the cameras captured Vanessa bringing Julian to the house. They were clearly intoxicated, stumbling in, laughing loudly, entirely unaware that Ethan was awake, huddled in his bed, listening to their raucous celebration. Other footage showed Vanessa coaching Ethan, her voice syrupy sweet but undeniably firm. Remember to tell Grandma you had a great time after a rushed, hour-long outing to the park, a thinly veiled attempt to present an illusion of maternal care. Throughout it all, Evelyn maintained her supportive, non-threatening facade. She consistently filled the void in Ethan's care, becoming his anchor, his steady presence. She helped him rebuild his volcano, ensured he completed his homework, and read him bedtime stories just as Daniel used to. Then, Vanessa unexpectedly confronted Evelyn about selling the house. "This place is too big, Evelyn, too many memories. It's time to sell and move on." Evelyn casually countered, her voice calm. "Well, if you're planning on moving out, I could always move in permanently. For Ethan's stability, of course." She watched for Vanessa's reaction, a flicker of calculation in her eyes. "Daniel left the house free and clear, no mortgage, so I'm quite capable of maintaining it." The revelation hit Vanessa hard. Her face shifted from confident assertion to a new, wary assessment. Evelyn could almost see the gears turning in Vanessa's head, realizing this wouldn't be as easy as she'd hoped. Later that evening, as Evelyn tucked Ethan into bed, he looked up at her, his innocent eyes full of a wisdom beyond his years. "Grandma," he asked, his voice small, "are you going to live here now instead of Mom?" Evelyn's heart squeezed. He'd heard something. "Mom told someone on the phone that you were selfish and trying to take the house from her." Ethan paused, then added simply, "I want you to stay. You help me with homework and remember my medicine and make real food." Evelyn, deeply moved by his innocent perceptiveness and the stark contrast it painted of his parents, leaned down and kissed his forehead. "I'm going to stay very, very close, sweet pea," she promised, her voice firm with a renewed, unshakable determination. This was no longer just about Daniel's will or Vanessa's schemes. This was about Ethan, and Evelyn would do everything in her power to protect him. 4 weeks after Daniel's death, the fragile peace in the house was shattered by Vanessa's casual announcement. "I'm taking Ethan to my parents in Arizona for a few weeks," she declared, her tone breezy, as if discussing a weekend trip to the park. Evelyn's heart seized. Arizona? For a few weeks? It sounded like a trial run for something far more permanent. Vanessa waved off Evelyn's immediate concern about Ethan's school, dismissing it with a flick of her wrist. "Oh, Evelyn, children are resilient. A little break won't hurt him. New experiences, you know." Evelyn knew it was a lie. New experiences were for Vanessa, not Ethan. Then came the unexpected invitation. "I think we should have a private dinner," Vanessa proposed, her voice laced with an artificial sweetness, "to discuss everything. Ethan's future, a solution that works for everyone." Evelyn knew this wasn't an olive branch, it was a trap. The upscale restaurant Vanessa chose was bathed in soft, amber light, a stark contrast to the darkness brewing beneath the surface. Vanessa, dressed impeccably, exuded a convivial, almost generous atmosphere, raising her champagne glass. "To new beginnings," she toasted, her eyes sparkling, "and to finding solutions that honor Daniel's memory." She even ordered Evelyn a glass of champagne, claiming, "Daniel always said this was your favorite." Evelyn, though, knew Daniel had preferred a different, less expensive brand. Vanessa's gesture was a clumsy attempt to create a false intimacy, to lull Evelyn into a sense of trust. "Daniel's will," Vanessa began, her tone shifting to one of regretful understanding. "It truly created complications, didn't it? It was not at all what Daniel would have wanted if he'd been thinking clearly." She leaned in, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "I've been speaking with an excellent estate attorney, you see. He believes we could easily contest the will. Daniel's mental state, the medications he was on, there are grounds, Evelyn." She watched Evelyn's face for a reaction, for any sign of fear or capitulation. Then came her better solution. Vanessa pushed a glossy brochure for a luxurious Phoenix condo across the table, her smile unwavering. "My attorney," she continued, "has helped me draft a mutual agreement. If you simply transfer the house and the vehicles back to me, Evelyn, we can avoid all the messy legal battles." She paused, letting the silence hang heavy. "In exchange," she said, her voice dripping with calculated generosity, "I'll guarantee you can see Ethan regularly. Every other weekend, of course, and all major holidays." Evelyn was stunned, the breathtaking audacity of it. Vanessa was essentially ransoming her own grandson, using Ethan as collateral in her greedy scheme. The offer was so vile, so devoid of true emotion, that Evelyn felt a cold, righteous fury begin to simmer beneath her calm exterior. Vanessa, oblivious to Evelyn's internal turmoil, continued, a casual bombshell dropping with each word. And of course, the Arizona trip might become more permanent. Julian has some wonderful development opportunities there, and I've found some excellent private schools for Ethan. It was crystal clear. Vanessa intended to separate Ethan from everything he knew, from every connection to Daniel, and most cruelly from Evelyn herself. She wanted to erase Daniel's memory, to start fresh with Julian, unburdened by her son's past or the inconvenient presence of her mother-in-law. Reaching into her purse, Vanessa produced a crisp, drafted agreement, a legal document already awaiting Evelyn's signature. It's a clean, simple resolution, Evelyn, she said, pushing it towards her. Everyone wins. Evelyn picked up the document, her fingers tracing the bold print, her mind racing. She remembered Daniel's words. Don't let her know what you know or suspect. Watch and wait. Document everything. She looked at Vanessa, forcing a reluctant sigh. Vanessa, Evelyn said, her voice carefully neutral, this is a lot. I really need to think about it. And have Marcus review it, of course. Daniel always said I should never sign anything without proper legal review. Vanessa's smile tightened, a flicker of irritation in her eyes. Well, I hope you consider carefully, Evelyn. Fighting me on this would only hurt Ethan in the long run. I'm sure you wouldn't want that. It was a thinly veiled threat, a confirmation of the darkness Evelyn now knew lay within Vanessa. Driving home in the quiet darkness, Evelyn's hands finally began to shake. Her worst suspicions had been confirmed. Vanessa was willing to use her own son as a pawn, to cut him off from the only stable, loving figure he had left. She pulled out her phone, dialing Marcus. Marcus, she said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. She's planning to take Ethan to Arizona permanently, and she's offered me a devil's bargain. Marcus's reply was surprisingly calm, almost pleased. Perfect, Evelyn. This is exactly what we needed. It's time to move to the next phase. Prepare yourself. This is where we make our move. Marcus Thorne sat across from Evelyn, his expression grim as he reviewed Vanessa's written proposition, the document that had so brazenly laid out her devil's bargain. This, Evelyn, he said, tapping the paper, is essentially a confession, textbook coercion, and the clause about Arizona that establishes premeditation for removing Ethan from his support system. Evelyn felt a cold certainty settle in her stomach. Daniel had known. He had prepared for this. Marcus then revealed Daniel's emergency protocol, a contingency plan that now snapped into frightening focus. Daniel wanted you to seek temporary custody of Ethan, Evelyn. He left instructions for a petition for emergency custody modification. Evelyn was stunned. Daniel had foreseen this level of desperation from Vanessa, had known she would try to take Ethan away. Temporary guardianship based on parental neglect and Ethan's best interests during this period of grief, Marcus explained, his voice low and firm. He then laid out the meticulous evidence they had accumulated. Evelyn's detailed journal entries, the damning security footage, statements from Ethan's teachers about his sudden academic decline, notes from his grief counselor, the photos from Miami revealing Vanessa's affair and Ethan's distress, and finally Vanessa's written proposition itself. Each piece was a nail in Vanessa's carefully constructed coffin of deceit. A court-approved child psychologist, Dr. Ramirez, will interview Ethan tomorrow, Marcus stated. Her findings will be crucial. Evelyn, though heartbroken by the chilling foresight Daniel had displayed, looked at Marcus, her resolve unshakable. I'm prepared, she affirmed. Marcus advised Evelyn to maintain her current approach with Vanessa, to keep her believing Evelyn was still considering the proposition. Vanessa, true to form, texted later that day, demanding an answer. Evelyn, following Marcus's advice, replied, raising a few vague questions about visitation details, and promising to arrange a meeting with Richard's attorney, a fictional lawyer Evelyn invented to buy more time and sow doubt. The next day, Dr. Ramirez's preliminary findings were significant. Ethan, she reported, showed elevated anxiety and a clear attachment to Evelyn, viewing her as his primary source of stability and comfort. With this crucial piece of evidence, Marcus immediately filed the emergency petition. A hearing was scheduled for the very next morning. The phone call from Vanessa after she was served was a volcanic eruption of fury. "You scheming, manipulative witch!" she shrieked, her voice distorted by rage. "How dare you try to steal my son?" Evelyn, remembering Marcus's calm instructions, held the phone away from her ear until the worst of the vitriol subsided. Then she replied with a cool, measured tone, "On the advice of counsel, I can't discuss this matter directly with you, Vanessa." It was a phrase that only fueled Vanessa's rage, but Evelyn knew it was the only safe response. Ethan, hearing the commotion from his room, later noticed his mom sounded mad, asking Evelyn if she was mad at him. Evelyn hugged him tight, reassuring him, "Never, sweet pea, never at you." At the courthouse the following morning, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Vanessa was already there, meticulously playing the role of the grieving, devoted widow. She clutched a framed photo of Daniel and Ethan, her eyes meeting Evelyn's, across the waiting room, with a glacial hatred that sent a shiver down Evelyn's spine. Julian Vance was conspicuously absent. Judge Carlton, a stern, no-nonsense woman known for her keen legal mind, wasted no time. "The court finds sufficient cause for emergency intervention," she stated, her voice resonating with authority. Marcus, now Thomas, as he prefers to be addressed in court, presented their methodical case: the documented neglect, the alarming incidents in Miami, Dr. Ramirez's expert psychological report, and the chilling specificity of Vanessa's written proposition. Vanessa's attorney, a slick, aggressive man named Gerald Winters, countered with a flurry of accusations, portraying Evelyn as grief-deranged and Vanessa as merely temporarily overwhelmed by the sudden loss of her husband. He painted Evelyn as a manipulative mother-in-law attempting to seize control of Daniel's assets. But Evelyn's testimony was calm, focused. She spoke not of Vanessa's flaws, but of Ethan's needs. She described his anxiety, his need for stability, and emphasized that her goal was not to replace Vanessa, but to provide Ethan with a safe, nurturing environment. After careful consideration of all the evidence, Judge Carlton's gavel fell, a decisive thud that echoed through the courtroom. Given the compelling evidence of documented neglect and the child's expressed emotional distress, she announced, this court grants Evelyn Sterling temporary guardianship of Ethan Sterling for a period of 60 days, effective immediately. Vanessa's facade shattered, her face contorted with fury, whispering accusations and demands for an appeal to her attorney. Judge Carlton, unmoved, issued a stern warning to Vanessa about demonstrating mature parenting capacity during the temporary guardianship period. As Evelyn left the courtroom, a furious Vanessa hissed at her eyes blazing with malice. "This isn't over, Evelyn. Not by a long shot. You have no idea what's coming." Evelyn leaned against the cold courthouse wall, the magnitude of the victory sinking in. Ethan was safe, for now. But Vanessa's chilling threat lingered in the air, a dark promise of battles yet to come. 6 weeks after the court granted Evelyn temporary guardianship, a fragile peace settled over the house. Ethan, still processing the whirlwind of changes, looked up at Evelyn one morning, his eyes filled with a poignant question. "Grandma," he asked softly, "is Mom ever coming back?" He then admitted, his voice barely audible, that he had been scared all the time when Vanessa talked about Arizona. And, he added, a flicker of defiance in his young eyes, "I didn't like Julian." Evelyn's heart ached, but she understood. Ethan, too, had seen the truth. Vanessa's court-mandated supervised visits had been sporadic at best, and predictably often focused on her phone or leading questions designed to extract information from Ethan. One particularly jarring visit saw Vanessa attempting to bring Julian along, despite the court order. When refused, she stormed out, leaving Ethan in tears, visibly distressed by her dramatic exit. Just when Evelyn thought they might finally have some stability, Marcus called with a new complication. "Vanessa's attorney filed a motion to dismiss the case, Evelyn," he explained, his voice tight with concern, claiming all our evidence was manufactured. The truly disturbing part, however, was his next revelation. Julian Vance has connections. The motion has been assigned to Judge Blackwell, a known associate of his. A chilling wave of fear washed over Evelyn. Julian's influence was reaching into the courtroom. The investigator's latest report confirmed Evelyn's worst fears. Vanessa and Julian had recently put significant deposits on property in the Cayman Islands, confirming they were a flight risk. Against Marcus's advice, Evelyn agreed to meet Vanessa privately at Riverside Park. She knew it was risky, but a gut feeling told her this was necessary. Marcus, ever cautious, was discreetly parked nearby, and Evelyn's phone, hidden in her purse, was recording their entire conversation. Vanessa arrived, looking unusually subdued, devoid of her usual polished facade. "Evelyn," she began, her voice lacking its usual bite, "I'm dropping the custody case. I'm signing over full custody to you." Evelyn's breath caught in her throat. She braced herself for the catch. Vanessa's reason, delivered with clinical detachment, was chilling. "Julian and I are moving to Grand Cayman. There are development opportunities that require us to be there for at least 3 years." She gestured vaguely. "Ethan needs stability. I can't provide that right now." It was an astonishing admission, a stark confirmation of her priorities. "I'm offering a clean break," Vanessa continued, her gaze direct, unemotional. "No contested hearings, no financial investigations into Daniel's accounts or anything else. You get full custody and I move on." She dismissed Daniel's assets with a wave of her hand. "Julian's development will make those look like pocket change." Evelyn stared at her, a profound realization dawning. Daniel's foresight, his careful planning, had ultimately forced Vanessa to choose. And she had chosen her selfish desires over her son's needs. He had protected Ethan, not by fighting Vanessa, but by creating a situation where she would willingly relinquish him. 1 week later, in Judge Carlton's chambers, the voluntary custody agreement was reviewed. Vanessa, present but silent, signed away all parental rights, save for limited visitation rights that Evelyn knew she would rarely, if ever, exercise. Evelyn, her voice firm and clear, accepted full legal guardianship. "Ethan needs stability, love, and a strong connection to his father's memory," she stated, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. Judge Carlton, a faint smile touching her lips, signed the final orders. As they left, Marcus quietly gripped Evelyn's arm. "Daniel would be proud, Evelyn," he murmured. "He protected Ethan the only way he could, by entrusting him to you." 6 months later, Evelyn and Ethan stood in their backyard planting a small memorial garden for Daniel. Ethan, carefully placing a seedling into the soil, looked up at Evelyn. "Grandma," he asked, "do you think Dad knew Mom would leave?" Evelyn paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your dad," she explained, "foresaw that sometimes adults make choices based on what they want rather than what children need. He just wanted to make sure you were safe and loved, no matter what." Ethan nodded slowly, a quiet understanding in his eyes. "I miss Dad every day," he confessed. "But I don't miss how things were after he died, when Mom was always angry or gone." Evelyn later found Daniel's last letter, tucked away in his old desk, marked "When it's resolved." It was a heartfelt thank you for protecting Ethan, ending with a simple plea. "Tell him stories about me, Mom. Tell him everything." 3 years passed. Ethan, now 11, stood on the school stage, confidently accepting the lead role in his school play. He was a thriving, confident boy, surrounded by Evelyn's unwavering love and the stable environment Daniel had so meticulously planned for. He made the quiet decision not to tell Vanessa, who had essentially vanished from their lives, now married to Julian and developing properties in Thailand, a new country, a new life, unburdened by her past. Daniel's college fund restructuring was approved, securing Ethan's future education, a final enduring gift from a father who loved him beyond measure. Evelyn, at 68, often reflected on the unexpected vitality and purpose raising Ethan had given her. What began with a midnight call in devastating news had transformed into a beautiful, enduring family bond, a testament to Daniel's love and a grandmother's unwavering devotion. The horror and mystery of the past had faded, replaced by the quiet joy of a new beginning, a legacy of love blooming from the ashes of betrayal. The call at 2:17 a.m. truly was a harbinger of news too terrible to wait for daylight. My world tilted on its axis the moment I heard about Daniel, my brilliant, kind-hearted, only child. Nothing could have prepared me for that loss, disrupting the natural order of things in the most brutal way. But what followed was an even darker revelation. His wife, Vanessa. She tried to manipulate, to coerce, to ransom my grandson, Ethan, all for her own selfish desires, utterly devoid of the grief a devoted wife should bear. Yet Daniel, even in death, protected us, his meticulously planned will, his hidden evidence, In his final letter were his silent weapons against her betrayal. My journey from a grieving mother to Ethan's fierce protector was one I never imagined. The courtroom showdowns, the quiet observations, the constant battle against Vanessa's lies. Every moment was for Ethan. Today, as I watch him thrive, a confident, loving boy, I know Daniel's last wishes were honored. The love he had for his son transcends everything, building a new family constellation where stability and care finally reign. Raising Ethan has given me an unexpected vitality, transforming tragedy into a beautiful, enduring purpose.